A black veteran, confined to a wheelchair, with his faithful service dog by his side, embarked on a routine drive home that erupted into a nationwide uproar. When police stopped him, they didn't see a hero, they saw a danger. What unfolded next didn't merely rattle the city, it gripped the entire nation, forcing it to confront the truth. Dear viewer, prepare to witness more than a story. It's a searing testament to unyielding courage and the fight for justice in the shadows society ignores. If you're new here, drop a comment below to share where you're watching from. If tales like this stir your soul, challenge your mind, or spark reflection, hit subscribe and tap the bell icon. We amplify voices that demand to be heard every single day. Thank you for joining us. Now, let's dive into the saga.
It was after 9 p.m. when James Carter's van glided along the edge of Sunset Boulevard. A dry wind howled through the hills, carrying whispers of secrets only the night could hold. Headlights sliced through the darkness, carving a path along the twisting road, revealing pine trees and fleeting glimpses of Seattle's skyline shimmering afar. James had navigated this route countless times, fresh from chess night at the community center, with his service dog, Max, curled up in the back and a stack of volunteer forms strapped into the passenger seat. This Tuesday felt ordinary, until red and blue lights flared in his rearview mirror, pulsing with urgency. A siren blared once, sharp and commanding. James signaled, eased to a stop, and pulled over. His breath caught, held tight in his chest. At 72, his movements were slower, but his mind burned with clarity. Too sharp to forget how these encounters often ended for black men, especially those in wheelchairs. He killed the engine, planting both hands firmly on the dashboard as he drilled into his grandsons. Max let out a soft whine from the back, sensing the shift in the air. The patrol cruiser's door slammed shut. Heavy footsteps closed in, deliberate and ominous. A flashlight's beam stabbed through the mirror, blinding him. James blinked, but held still. The officer offered no greeting, no request for a license. Instead, he barked, "Get out of the vehicle." James exhaled, his voice steady yet resolute. "Officer, I can't get out. I'm a disabled veteran, bound to this wheelchair." A pause, then silence. The flashlight dipped, scanning the van's interior. The officer stepped closer. "Tinted windows. That's a violation. I'm searching the vehicle." "My registration and medical exemption are in the glove box," James offered. "I can grab them." "Keep your hands where I can see them," the officer snapped, his tone slicing through the night. Tension snapped like a taut wire. The hills echoed with the crunch of approaching boots. James's heart pounded, not with fear, but with a weary recognition. After surviving Iraq, losing his legs to an IED, and dedicating years to aiding fellow vets, was this how it would end? Another order. "Open the door." "I'll need your help," James replied. "The ramp's manual." The officer ignored him, yanking the door open with a jerk. Max growled, low and protective. James held his breath. What happened next was swift, yet hauntingly familiar. Agitated, the officer flung the door wide, reaching inside, heedless of Max's harness or the crutches folded neatly by James's side. He gripped James's shoulder, pulling hard. "I said, get out!" "I can't," James repeated, his voice firmer, unyielding. "You're hurting me." The officer didn't relent. Max's bark exploded, fierce and defensive, as he lunged forward. The officer staggered back, hand darting to his taser. "Wait," James shouted, one hand rising instinctively. "He's trained. He's protecting, not attacking." Too late. A crack split the air, followed by a gut-wrenching yelp. The taser hit Max, and the dog crumpled. James froze, his breath stolen, his world tilting. It wasn't just pain that struck. It was the echo of a grief buried deep, where memories of fallen soldiers, lost comrades, and unanswered pleas lingered. He stared at Max, twitching silently on the van's floor, his guardian, his companion, the last tether to a life before this broken peace. James didn't weep. His gaze sharpened, locking onto the officer. "You need to report this. You just attacked a Federal Service animal and a disabled citizen." The officer retreated, hand fumbling for his radio, eyes flickering with unease. Something had shifted. Another cruiser screeched to a halt behind them, then a third. A cyclist's phone camera clicked, capturing the scene. Seattle was already watching. A younger officer, hesitant, approached from the second car, taking in Max's limp form, the harness, the wheelchair, and James's veteran plates. His face blanched. "Sir, are you hurt?" James didn't respond. The silence spoke louder than words. Paramedics arrived 15 minutes later. James refused transport, but demanded they check Max, whose pulse flickered faintly, but held. "He'll pull through," a paramedic said. "He'll need care." James nodded. By now, a crowd had gathered. A bystander streamed live on Facebook. A retired teacher called out his name. "That's James Carter. He runs the chess program for kids in Capitol Hill. He's a veteran." Another voice murmured. "He testified before Congress on veterans' rights last year." The officer who fired the taser stood mute. By the time James reached home, the video had surged to 200,000 views. By dawn, it was on CNN. By afternoon, the city was demanding answers. But for James Carter, none of this was shocking. What stunned him was how long it took for the world to notice. James kept teaching his Saturday chess class. Kids still came, teasing his old-school R&B tracks, begging for snacks between moves. Life pressed forward. But when a new face entered the center, especially one with a badge, James met their gaze, waiting, not for fear or excuses, but for recognition. The world had seen what it took to notice him. When the cameras left, he needed to know someone still saw. The hardest part wasn't the pain or headlines. It was the question haunting every corner of his home, etched in Max's scar. Why did it take his fall to make them look? And would they keep looking when he was gone? It started with one email. Michael Evans, a paralegal, watched Seattle voices over a sandwich at his downtown Seattle legal aid desk. He wasn't meant to be there late. But when James said, "Justice isn't punishment, it's prevention," Michael froze mid-bite. He rewound twice. The injustice was blatant, but James's calm resolve hit harder. How many times must a man be broken before he stops bracing for the fall? That night, Michael drafted a memo for his boss, Karen Sullivan, a civil rights attorney, with unyielding resolve and a razor-sharp memory. She read it twice, then asked, "Does he want to fight?" Michael didn't know. By Monday, Karen sat in James's living room, sipping instant coffee, listening intently. Max, in a loose sweater, eyed her warily. "I don't want money or to sue for show," James said. Karen nodded. "What do you want?" He paused. "For them to see what they miss, for the next black man in a chair to move through this city without needing a body cam to survive." She set her mug down. "Let's build that fight." They began small: public records, use of force reports, body cam footage. Weeks of digging unearthed a damning truth. Officer Robert Dawson had 3 prior complaints, 2 for excessive force against black or Latino men, none disciplined. A radio transcript broke the case open. Dawson, running James's plates, muttered, "Just another loiterer near the hills." Those words, caught on tape, exposed a mindset hardened into instinct, one that saw what, not who. James wasn't shocked. He'd known all along. The scale stunned him. After Seattle voices, emails poured in. A Latina mother whose son was cuffed over a broken taillight. A veteran with PTSD held at gunpoint for pausing. a blind man in Tacoma berated for slow compliance. It wasn't just a case, it was a chorus. Sarah began sorting letters, mapping complaints by zip code. Red markers clustered like wounds along Queen Anne Hill. One night, sifting through reports, James whispered, "Why didn't we speak sooner?" Sarah looked up. No one listened. But now, Seattle was, haltingly, imperfectly, but undeniably. The ACLU offered Karen research support. A council member requested a private meeting with James. A reform committee invited him to testify, not as a victim, but as a witness to the community. The irony stung. For years, they'd ignored him. Now, they handed him the mic. He agreed on one condition. His words would focus on policy, not pain. At the hearing, in a black blazer and navy cap, he silenced the room. Blank-faced officials clutched tablets and notepads, but James didn't waver. "I'm not here for pity," he declared. "I'm here because unchecked silence after injustice becomes policy." He spoke of Max, the taser, the officer who saw a problem, not a veteran. He described the click of car doors locking as he crossed streets. He painted the erosion of dignity, not from his actions, but from others' refusal to see. He closed with a challenge. How many of us must be quietly violated before you see the system wasn't built to protect us equally? No applause followed, just a heavy, sacred silence. The hearing ended. That evening, the mayor's office issued a statement. "We are reviewing Mr. Carter's incident with his service animal. We recognize the need for updated sensitivity protocols for veterans and those with disabilities." It wasn't justice, but it was a spark. James knew change wouldn't come overnight. He felt the weight in grocery store aisles where stares lingered too long. But now he had allies, a legal team, a fierce niece, and a dog who still barked at the doorbell despite his limp. One night, locking up the community center after chess class, a young man in a hoodie approached, hesitant. "Mr. Carter?" James nodded. "I saw your video. My dad was profiled like you. Never spoke up. Said no one cared." James waited. "He was wrong," the man said. "You made them care." James placed a hand on his shoulder, nodding once. At home, Max slept under the table, a bandana dangling from his jaw. James sat by the window, lights off, staring into the night. A siren wailed faintly, fleeting. This time, it wasn't a threat. It was a beacon of change. For the first time in years, James dared to hope. The courtroom reeked not of justice, but of varnish, stale coffee, and yellowed paper trapped in dusty drawers. James Carter sat near the front, hands clasped, his charcoal suit a quiet act of defiance. Max, groomed and vigilant, wore a red service vest, his leash coiled around James's wrist, a fragile tether in a system that offered no control. Washington versus Officer Robert Dawson seized the nation's attention when the footage aired. James motionless, the taser's crack echoing through a narrow alley off Sunset Boulevard. Seattle didn't want this trial, but it craved it. The benches brimmed with students, elders, reporters, veterans, activists, parents, shoulder to shoulder. Not all knowing James, but all knowing what he stood for, all there to stand with him. The prosecution opened with no theatrics, only truth. Karen Sullivan spoke plainly. "We're not here for drama. We're here because a badge shouldn't crush the rule of law." She laid out the timeline. The routine drive, the baseless stop, the taser, the ignored service dog, the neglected medical aid, the body cam footage Dawson tried, and failed, to erase. The jury, 6 women, 6 men, mostly white, sat stone-faced. The defense followed, led by a slick attorney with a honeyed voice masking decay. "The incident was regrettable," he drawled, lingering on regrettable, like it was a minor mishap. But Officer Dawson followed protocol, acting on perceived danger as trained. The room didn't stir, but unease rippled. The footage didn't lie. No weapon, no threat. Just a man in a wheelchair and a dog's single bark. James stayed silent early in the trial. "Let evidence outshine trauma," he told Karen. On day 3, he took the stand. Sworn in, his hand trembled faintly. Karen urged him to recount that night. He spoke with measured weight, cataloging pain like a ledger. "I turned onto Pine Street," he said, "like every weeknight. Max was in the back, leash taut, alert. The cruiser appeared. No sirens, no lights, just headlights and a yell. I stopped. He didn't." Karen asked what lingered most. James's eyes held hers. The speed of it, yet how slow it felt. The air reeked of burnt plastic. I thought, "Run, Max." But he stayed. That's his training. Silence gripped the room. No coughs, no whispers. After the taser, Karen pressed. "Did the officer help?" "No," James said. He stood over me and said, "Comply faster next time." A long pause followed. Then Karen asked what no report had dared. "What do you want this trial to achieve?" James inhaled, his voice breaking once. "I want courtrooms to matter. I want my nephew's first suit to be for a graduation, not a funeral. I want the law to stop demanding I prove my worth." His words landed, pens froze, jaws tightened, eyes dropped. The defense called Dawson next. In full uniform, he showed no regret. "I followed procedure," he repeated, a mantra. "I saw a threat." "What did you see?" the prosecutor pressed. "Describe him." Dawson faltered. "He had a hoodie, a dog, a wheelchair." "You didn't see a man." "I saw a situation," he said, flat and hollow. The room exhaled, not for his words, but for what he omitted. He never saw James. Only a risk, a disruption. In closing, Karen stood, noteless. "Silence breeds complicity," she told the jury. Officer Dawson had power, a badge. Faced with vulnerability he didn't protect, he punished. That's not policing. It's prejudice cloaked in protocol. The jury deliberated 5 hours. At dusk, the verdict came. Guilty of aggravated battery, guilty of obstruction, not guilty of evidence tampering. Imperfect, but real. Reporters swarmed the hallway, cameras flashing like vultures. James raised a hand, then wheeled away. That night, Seattle stirred restlessly, not from chaos, but from facing its own reflection and disliking it. Maybe it chose to change. In his modest living room, lit by one lamp, Max at his feet, James watched the verdict blaze across screens. He didn't cry or cheer. He whispered, "Now let them hear." The next morning, uncertainty hung heavy. Rain pattered windows, asking unanswered questions. On his south side porch, James sat, a quilt over his knees, Max curled below. The air held a post-storm hush, where endings and beginnings collide. Headlines screamed, "Officer guilty in landmark case. Veteran in wheelchair ignites reform." James ignored the TV. His triumph wasn't in clips or stats. It was in clarity, in surviving, speaking, and forcing the world to see him. Not broken, not a threat, just human. That afternoon, a letter arrived. No stamp, just notebook paper tucked in the gate, adorned with green crayon swirls. "Dear Mr. Carter," it read, "Mom says you're why police are learning better. I can walk our dog safely now. Thank you for being brave. I want to be like you." James lingered on the crooked, misspelled words, truer than any courtroom speech. He folded it, tucking it near his heart like a relic. Weeks later, change stirred. Not loud, but enough. Precincts rolled out disability awareness and de-escalation training. Schools invited James to teach, not as a victim, but a guide. Veterans groups offered support. A college asked him to guest lecture in criminal justice. He agreed. One Thursday, in a classroom of 20 folding chairs, He faced skeptical and curious eyes. "I'm not here to make you perfect," he began. "I'm here to keep you from going blind to what's before you. Power doesn't corrupt, it reveals." They listened and kept listening. James never returned to Sunset Boulevard's alley, but in memory he revisited, not for pain, but to mark where silence broke and change sparked, where a leash, a bark, and a man in a chair redefined justice. His scars, seen and unseen, weren't wounds. They were armor, forged in truth. Max, older, slower, trailed him everywhere. In the city, eyes no longer slid away. Some nodded, some whispered thanks, some stopped to speak. James didn't need praise. He needed to be seen, not as a headline, but as a man who turned fire into purpose. A new chapter unfolded, penned in his own hand. In a city deafened by sirens and split by fear, James Carter, an aging black veteran in a wheelchair, showed a nation that justice isn't the loudest cry. It's the refusal to stay silent when it counts. His story didn't start in court or with a viral video. It began one ordinary night on Sunset Boulevard, with a leash, a dog, and a badge that saw his body before his humanity. He wasn't chasing fame or history. He was just driving home with Max, as he had for years, when one encounter with police spiraled into a moment that shook systems and stirred questions about race, power, and the unseen courage of those society overlooks. It wasn't just his fight, it was a reckoning. When James's bruises spoke louder than the officer's report, when footage forced Seattle to face itself, the nation leaned in. The trial wasn't about one officer or one night. It was about patterns, how we see men in wheelchairs, treat veterans post-service, and decide who's believed when systems fail. James never let pain define him. Through every dodged press conference, every meeting room and auditorium he entered, he carried more than anger. He carried truth, quiet, relentless, unshakable. And people listened, not because he demanded it, but because dignity, once unveiled, commands attention. Now, policies shift, training manuals evolve. Cadets learn not just to enforce, but to see the humanity in every citizen. None of this would have happened without one man's refusal to stay silent. What does James's journey teach us? First, courage isn't always standing tall. It's rolling forward against a system urging you to stay put, speaking when silence tempts, knowing your worth when the world forgets. Second, change starts small. In quiet rooms, subtle acts, and rejecting bitterness. James didn't seek fame. He sought fairness, giving voice to the voiceless. Finally, his story demands of us. What do we do with injustice? Scroll past? Doubt it? Or rise, listen, and let it transform us? If James's tale moves you, share it. Let it live beyond this screen. Discuss it with someone who denies racism's persistence. Send it to a friend who thinks one voice can't matter. Because now, you know it can. If you believe in stories that unveil truth, uplift the silenced, and remind us what we fight for, subscribe. Your support fuels these narratives. Every like, comment, share screams that dignity matters, courage resonates, and you're part of something greater than a video. This isn't just content, it's conscience. James Carter's story is one of many. Stay with us. More are coming.